You trusted someone once. Not a stranger, someone close, someone who sat across from you, looked you in the eye, and made you feel safe enough to speak. Maybe you told them about a fear you had never said out loud before. Maybe you shared a dream that was still fragile, still unfinished, still raw at the edges. Maybe you confessed something about yourself that you had been carrying alone for a very long time. And for a moment, it felt like relief. Then one day, not suddenly, but slowly, you began to notice something. A small smirk when your name came up in a room. A comment that landed just a little too precisely. A silence that knew exactly where to cut. And you realized, with a coldness that settled deep in your chest, that the thing you shared in trust had become a tool in someone else's hand. That feeling, that specific, quiet devastation, that is what this is about. Not betrayal as a story, betrayal as a law that the world enforces every single day and never once writes down. And tonight, you are going to hear it stated plainly, perhaps for the first time in your life. Hai lung nghe tut ki, because what comes next is not advice. It is a warning. And the difference between those two things is the difference between someone who guides you and someone who is trying to save you. Friedrich Nietzsche spent his entire life watching honest men fall, not because they were foolish, not because they were weak in the traditional sense, but because they were open, because they believed that the world would meet their honesty with honesty in return. He watched silence protect the powerful. He watched confession bury the good. And from that watching, he extracted something that most philosophers never dared to say clearly. The world does not reward honesty. It rewards control. Read that again, not quickly, slowly. Let it settle somewhere uncomfortable inside you, because that discomfort is the beginning of understanding. We grow up being told the opposite. We are raised on the belief that openness builds connection, that sharing builds trust, that vulnerability is strength, and in a perfect world, that would be entirely true. But Nietzsche was not interested in the world as we wish it were. He was obsessed with the world as it actually is. Cold, hierarchical, full of people who are always watching for the moment you expose something they can use. He did not say this to make you bitter. He said it to make you unbreakable. Because here is the truth that sits at the center of everything you are about to hear. Every piece of yourself you reveal becomes a piece of leverage you surrender. Not sometimes, not with certain people, every time. To every person who has not yet proven, through time and through action, that they deserve the weight of your truth. And eat ai bit dionay. Most people never figure this out until after the damage has already been done. Think about the people you admire most. The ones who seem to move through the world with a kind of quiet gravity. The ones who never seem rattled, never seem desperate, never seem to need the room's approval. You likely notice that they do not explain themselves. Often, they do not announce their plans before they execute them. They do not perform their pain for an audience. They do not let you see what shakes them. You may have mistaken that for coldness, for arrogance, for distance. It is none of those things. It is mastery. Nietzsche called it self-overcoming, the deliberate, daily discipline of refusing to be fully readable. Not because those people have something to hide, but because they understand. At a level most people never reach. That being readable is the same as being controllable, and being controllable is the slow death of everything you are trying to become. There are 4 specific things that fall under this law. 4 categories of self-revelation that the world conditions you to share freely, even eagerly, and that Nietzsche identified as the 4 most dangerous gifts you can give to the wrong person. Your true ambition, your real pain, your next move, and what truly controls you. These are not random. They are not arbitrary. Each one is a door. And once someone knows what is behind each door, they no longer need to force you. They simply need to walk through. Hai long nghe tut ki here, because this is where most people stop reading and start reacting. They hear this and they say, but surely not everyone is a threat. Surely some people deserve to know these things about me. And that response is understandable. It is human. It comes from a real place of longing for genuine connection. But that response misses the point entirely. Nietzsche was not telling you to trust no one. He was telling you something far more precise and far more dangerous to ignore. He was telling you that trust given through emotion rather than through evidence is not trust at all. It is exposure dressed in the language of love. You have felt this. The moment at 2 in the morning when something inside you breaks open and you tell someone everything because the silence had become too heavy and they happen to be there. The rush of relief that follows. The warmth. The sense of finally being seen. And then, weeks later, the slow realization that you handed a map of yourself to someone who had not yet earned the right to read it. That is the trap. That is the specific mechanism Nietzsche was warning against. Not cruelty, not calculated manipulation, just the ordinary human mistake of confusing the need to be seen with the wisdom to choose who sees you. Because at I bit, Dionne, the most dangerous person in your life is rarely the one who approaches you with obvious hostility. It is the one who approaches you with warmth, collects your confessions piece by piece over months and years, and waits quietly, patiently, until the moment your openness becomes more useful as a weapon than as a bond. By then, the collection is complete. Your fears, your dreams, your plans, your pressure points, everything mapped, everything filed, everything ready. And you gave it all away freely, in moments of trust, in moments of pain, in moments when you simply wanted someone to sit inside the weight of your life with you for a little while. This is not a story about evil people. This is a story about a law. And laws do not care about your intentions. They only care about what you do. So tonight, over the next several minutes, you are going to hear each of the 4 things in detail, Tao. Not as a lecture, not as a list, but as a slow dismantling of the story you were told about yourself and the world, replaced by something colder and stronger, and ultimately far more useful. But first, before we go any further, there is one thing you need to understand about everything that follows. One piece of context that changes the meaning of all 4 rules entirely. These 4 things are not separate warnings. They are one single law wearing 4 different faces. And the moment you see the law, clearly the real law, the one hiding underneath all 4, you will understand not just how to protect yourself, but why you kept getting hurt in the same way, by different people, in different years, in different rooms, wearing different names. The answer has been there the entire time, and it has nothing to do with the other person. It has everything to do with what you kept choosing to hand them. If this is already making you think of someone a moment, a conversation, a confession you wish you could take back, drop the name of the city where you are watching this right now in the comments below. You are not alone in this, and if you have not subscribed to this channel yet, do it now. Because what comes next in part 2 is where this goes from uncomfortable to genuinely life-changing. And what you keep handing them is yourself. Not all at once, never all at once. That is the part that makes it so difficult to see until it is already over. You hand yourself over in pieces. A small truth here, a quiet confession there, a moment of frustration that reveals more than you intended, a dream you mentioned too early, to the wrong person, in the wrong room, at the wrong time. And piece by piece, without ever signing anything, without ever agreeing to anything, you give someone a complete picture of who you are, what you want, what you fear, and exactly how to move you. Now we go deeper. Now we name the 4 doors. The first door is your ambition. Not your goals, not the safe, acceptable version of your future that you share at dinner tables and job interviews. Your real ambition, the one that lives in the quietest part of your mind. The one you return to at night when everything else goes silent. The one that feels almost too large to say out loud. Because saying it out loud makes it real, and making it real means it can be taken from you. That ambition, the true one, is the most dangerous thing you can reveal too early. Here is why. The moment you announce what you are building before it is built, You do not inspire the people around you, not most of them. What you actually do is activate something ancient and ugly in the human mind. Something that looks like encouragement, but functions like sabotage. Bankanyendra, Dionai, comb the people who respond to your dreams with the most enthusiasm in the beginning, are often the same people who, months later, are quietly celebrating your slowest days. Not because they are monsters, because they are human. Because your ambition, stated too openly, too early, becomes a mirror that makes them feel the distance between where they are and where they wanted to be. And mirrors, when they are uncomfortable, do not stay mirrors for long. They become weapons. Nietzsche wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." He was not being arrogant. He was being precise. He was describing an observation, not a judgment. And the observation is this: your rising makes other people aware of their stillness, and awareness of stillness, in people who are not yet ready to move, produces one consistent response. They try to pull you back down, not always with cruelty. Sometimes with concern. Are you sure that's realistic? Sometimes with humor. Look at you, thinking big. Sometimes with silence. A silence that withholds the encouragement you needed and replaces it with a cool, subtle doubt that you carry into your next decision. De la tu hokum zaitban ochung. No classroom will ever tell you that announcing your dream is sometimes the fastest way to kill it. That the road between intention and execution is filled with people who will never openly oppose you, but will create just enough friction, just enough doubt, just enough quiet resistance to slow you down until you stop. The strongest people guard their ambition the way you guard a fire in the wind. Not because they are ashamed of it, but because they understand that fire needs oxygen to grow. And some people, the moment they see your flame, immediately begin looking for ways to remove the air. So the first door closes. You stop announcing. You start executing. You let the results speak. Because results, unlike intentions, cannot be argued with. But the second door is harder. Much harder. The second door is your pain. And this one is harder because we have been conditioned to believe the opposite with absolute conviction. We are told that sharing pain is healing, that vulnerability is connection, that the people who love you deserve to see your wounds. And in a world populated entirely by people with pure intentions, that would be perfectly true. But ban konyentrata dionai. Come, not everyone who leans in when you begin to break is leaning in because they want to help you heal. Some of them are leaning in because your breaking makes them feel something they have been quietly craving: relevance, power, the specific satisfaction of being needed by someone who is strong. There is a kind of person who is genuinely, almost chemically drawn to other people's suffering, not because they are evil in any cartoonish sense, but because your pain gives them a role, your struggle gives them a stage, and the moment you begin to recover, the moment you start standing up straight again, something shifts in how they treat you. They become slightly less warm, slightly less attentive, slightly less interested, because your strength has nothing for them but your weakness. Your weakness is a gift they never want to return. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He wrote that suffering shown to the wrong eyes does not purify the sufferer. It feeds the watcher. And he meant it literally. There are people in your life, perhaps people you love deeply, who have been quietly sustained by your pain for years, whose sense of identity is partially built on the architecture of your struggle. This is not betrayal in the obvious sense. This is something quieter and, in many ways, darker, because it wears the face of care so convincingly that you never think to question it. De la tu ha kumzaitbana chung. No one ever tells you to audit who becomes more present when you are falling apart and less present when you are climbing back up. No one ever teaches you to notice the pattern, to sit with the data of someone's behavior over time rather than the feeling of their words in the moment. But that pattern is the truth, and the truth, when you finally see it, changes everything. Your pain is yours, not a performance, not a service. not something you owe anyone in exchange for their company. You are allowed to heal in private. You are allowed to carry your hardest things without displaying them for an audience that has not earned the right to witness that level of you. Real strength is not the absence of pain. Real strength is the decision about who gets to see it. The second door closes. And now we arrive at the third door, the one that Nietzsche considered perhaps the most strategically critical of all four. Your next move. Not just your plans, your thinking, your direction. The calculations you are running quietly behind your eyes, while everyone around you thinks you are simply standing still. This is where it stops being emotional and becomes almost militarily precise. Bant konyet radionai, comme every person who has ever explained their strategy before executing it has given their opposition a gift they did not ask for and did not deserve. A preview, a map, time to prepare, reposition, and respond before you have even begun. Think about it in the simplest terms. If you are going to cross a river, you do not stand on the bank announcing to everyone which stones you plan to step on. You cross. You arrive on the other side. And only then, only from a position of completion, do you describe the path. Because by then, it no longer matters who knows. The crossing is done. Nietzsche believed that action divorced from announcement was one of the purest expressions of power a person could demonstrate. Not because secrecy is noble in itself, but because the gap between intention and execution is where most people are destroyed, not by their own failure, but by the interference of others who had too much information and too much time. De la tu ha hom zeban achung. They teach you to communicate openly, to be transparent, to share your vision with your team and your family and your community. And sometimes, yes, that matters. But there is a category of move, a private, critical, life-altering decision you are in the process of making that belongs to no one until it is already done. The promotion you are pursuing, the business you are building, the relationship you are leaving, the city you are planning to move to, the person you are becoming. None of these require an audience during construction. Only after. Only when the walls are standing and the roof is solid and the thing can no longer be dismantled by someone else's doubt or interference. The third door closes. 3 down, 1 remaining. And the fourth door is the one that Nietzsche guarded most carefully of all. The one he returned to again and again in his writing, not because it was the most complex, but because it was the most devastating when left open. It is the door to what truly controls you. Your trigger, your pressure point, the one thing, the one word, the one specific silence or form of rejection or tone of voice that can collapse your composure in seconds. The lever that, once discovered, does not need strength to pull. It only needs knowledge. We are almost there. But before we name it fully, before we describe exactly how it is found and exactly how it is used against you, you need to understand something about the person who finds it. Because it is almost never who you expect. And that is where this gets truly dark. It is almost never a stranger. That is the first thing you need to understand before everything else. You have been building your defenses facing the wrong direction, watching the door, checking the exits, scanning the room for unfamiliar faces, while the whole time, the person learning how to dismantle you was sitting right beside you, sharing your table, knowing your schedule, speaking at your birthday, calling to check in on your worst days. Not because they planned it from the beginning. That would almost be easier to accept. No, what actually happens is slower than that, more ordinary, more devastating, precisely, because of how unremarkable it looks while it is occurring. They simply paid attention, while you were being open, while you were being real, while you were doing everything the world told you was healthy and good and necessary for genuine connection. They were collecting, not consciously, maybe. Not with a notebook and a strategy, but the human mind remembers what it can use. And over months, over years, a complete picture assembles itself without anyone ever intending it to. Your fear of being abandoned, Filed. Your need for validation from specific people. Filed. The particular way your voice changes when you feel disrespected. Filed. The dream you mentioned once, only once, late at night when you thought the conversation was safe. Filed. And then one day, something shifts between you. Maybe you achieve something they wanted. Maybe you begin to outgrow the dynamic they had grown comfortable with. Maybe you simply stop being as available as you once were. And that absence reveals something in them they had successfully hidden until that moment. And they reach into the file. Not loudly, never loudly. That is not how this works. They say something small, precise, delivered with a calm that tells you immediately that it was not accidental, a reference to that fear, a mention of that dream, but twisted slightly, framed as evidence of your delusion. A single sentence, structured so perfectly around your specific pressure point that you feel it before you understand it. And your composure breaks. Right there, in public or in private, it does not matter. It breaks because they found the lever, and you gave them the lever, not out of foolishness, out of trust, out of the very human, very understandable need to be known by someone. Nietzsche wrote, "I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on I can't believe you." And what he meant goes beyond the simple pain of deception. He meant that the real damage of a broken trust is not what was lost. It is what becomes impossible afterward. The ability to speak without calculating. The ability to sit with someone and simply be, without armor, without strategy, without the constant, exhausting work of deciding how much of yourself is safe to show. That ability, once taken, is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. And here is the first mini-climax, the thing that most people feel but never say out loud. You already know who this is about, right now. As you are hearing this, a face appeared in your mind, a name, a moment, a specific conversation you have replayed more times than you want to admit. You did not have to search for it. It was already waiting. That is not coincidence. That is recognition. And recognition is the beginning of the only kind of power that actually protects you. Not the power to hurt them back, not the power to expose them. The power to understand the mechanism so completely that it can never be used on you again. But we are not there yet. Because before the understanding comes the darkest part of the truth. And this is the part that Nietzsche spent years circling before he finally said it directly. The fourth door, what truly controls you, is not discovered through cruelty. It is discovered through intimacy. Think about that. Sit with the full weight of it. The people who learn your triggers are not the people who attacked you. They are the people you let in, the people you called at midnight, the people you cried in front of, the people whose opinion of you mattered so much that you changed your behavior to protect it. Every moment of genuine vulnerability you offered was simultaneously a moment of data collection, not because they intended it that way, but because that is simply what happens when one person sees another person clearly over a long enough period of time. They learn the shape of you, and the shape of you includes every place where pressure produces a reaction. And here is where you need to hear something that will be difficult to receive. The secret for harvesting from existence the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment is to live dangerously. Nietzsche said that. But he was not talking about thrill-seeking. He was talking about the courage required to see the truth of your situation without flinching, to look directly at what is happening to you and around you without the comfort of denial. Living dangerously, in the Nietzschean sense, means being willing to know what you would rather not know, and what you would rather not know. What most people spend enormous amounts of unconscious energy avoiding is this. The version of yourself that keeps getting hurt is not a victim of other people's choices. It is the predictable result of a pattern you have been repeating. A pattern of handing the map to people before they have proven they know how to read it responsibly. A pattern of mistaking the feeling of being seen for the reality of being safe. These are not the same thing. Being seen feels like relief. Being safe is built through time. and de la diotedoitatka, the twist. The thing that reframes everything you have heard up until this moment. You have been listening to this as a warning about other people, about what they might do with your secrets, about how to protect yourself from the collectors, from the ones who file and wait and press the lever at the perfect moment. But the real warning was never about them. It was always about you, specifically, about the part of you that needs to be known so desperately that you will take the risk every single time, the part of you that, even after being hurt, even after watching the pattern complete itself again, will find a new person, a new room, a new midnight conversation, and begin opening the same doors. Because the longing to be fully seen is not a weakness. It is one of the most fundamentally human experiences that exists. Nietzsche knew this. He did not condemn it. He said it was the source of both our greatest creativity and our most catastrophic vulnerability. The question he was asking, the question he spent his entire philosophical life asking, was never should you let people see you. It was have you seen yourself first? Because here is the mechanism that almost no one talks about. The reason the lever works, the reason that one precise comment from the right person can collapse you in seconds, is not because they are powerful. It is because part of you believes what they are implying. Read that again. The trigger only triggers because somewhere inside you, in a room you do not visit often, there is a version of yourself that has already accepted fear as true, that you are not enough, that the dream was too large, that the wound never healed as completely as you told everyone it did, that you are more controllable than you want to appear. And when someone presses that point, they are not introducing a new idea. They are confirming one you have been quietly carrying. This is the real fourth door, not what other people know about you, what you know about yourself, that you have never been brave enough to face directly. Because the moment you face it, the moment you walk into that room and look clearly at what is actually there, the lever stops working. You cannot be manipulated by a fear you have already confronted. You cannot be destabilized by a doubt you have already examined. You cannot be controlled through a wound you have already chosen to heal on your own terms, in private, without an audience, without performing it for anyone who does not deserve the show. This is what Nietzsche meant by self-overcoming, not the dramatic, cinematic version, the quiet, daily, unglamorous act of sitting with your own most difficult truths until they lose their power to destroy you. The three doors close from the outside. You decide what you reveal about your ambition, your pain, your next move. Those are decisions about the world. But the fourth door, the most important one, closes from the inside, and only you can close it. And only by doing the one thing that is harder than any external discipline. Telling yourself the truth. Now, right now, before you hear what comes next. Because what comes next is not about protection anymore. What comes next is about something Nietzsche believed was rarer than intelligence, rarer than strength, rarer than success in any form that the world would recognize. And almost no one who starts this journey actually reaches it. The question is whether you are one of the few who will. Rarer than intelligence, rarer than strength. Nietzsche called it sovereignty, the condition of a person who has stopped being ruled by what others think, what others know, and what others can take. Not because they have built walls, but because they have built something far more permanent inside themselves. Something that does not depend on keeping others out. Something that simply cannot be moved by outside hands, no matter how precisely they know where to push. You reach sovereignty not by learning to hide. You reach it by learning 4 things that the pain was always trying to teach you. 4 lessons, 1 for each door. And we begin with the first. The first lesson arrives the way most real lessons do. Not in a classroom, not from a book, but in a moment of loss. You had a dream. You were somewhere in the early stages of it, the part where it still felt fragile and enormous at the same time. And you told someone. Not because you were careless, because you were excited, because the dream had been living in silence for so long that sharing it felt like finally breathing after holding your breath underwater. And they smiled, said the right things, asked the right questions, and then, in the weeks that followed, began the slow, almost imperceptible work of creating distance between you and the thing you wanted. A comment about the odds, a story about someone else who had tried something similar and failed. A casual, friendly, entirely deniable erosion of your confidence, delivered with the face of someone who simply cares about you. And somewhere in that experience, without fully naming it at the time, you learned something. Hailang ne tet ki. Because this is the first lesson stated plainly. Ambition is not a social object. It is a private engine. And engines do not need an audience to run. They need fuel, and they need space, and they need protection from the elements until they are powerful enough to withstand exposure. Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." The chaos he was describing is the unfinished thing, the dream before it becomes a plan, the idea before it becomes a result. That chaos is sacred. It is where everything real begins, and sacred things, it I biet dionai, do not survive being handled by people who cannot see their value. So the first lesson is this: you do not owe anyone a preview of what you are building. Your silence is not deception, it is devotion. Guard the chaos, birth the star alone. The second lesson comes harder, because it arrives not through the loss of a dream, but through the loss of something more intimate. The loss of a space where you believed you were safe to fall apart. You were going through something real, something heavy, the kind of weight that changes how you move through a room. And you reached for someone. You let them see the unguarded version, the version without composure, without performance, without the managed self you present to the world. You let them sit with your actual pain because you believed that was what closeness meant. And for a while it felt true. They were present, attentive, warm in a way that felt specific to you and your suffering. But then, slowly, you began to notice. Your recovery made them restless. Your improving days brought shorter calls and shorter messages. Your strength, returning piece by piece, seemed to remove something from the equation that they needed to remain. And in that noticing, the second lesson arrived. Hailang ye tut ki. Pain shared with the wrong person does not halve the suffering. It doubles the damage. Because now you are carrying the original wound, plus the new knowledge of who was nourishing themselves on it. Nietzsche said, "That which does not kill us makes us stronger." But he did not mean that suffering itself is the teacher. He meant that the decision of what you do with the suffering is where the transformation lives. You can perform your pain for an audience that feeds on it, in which case it becomes a performance that never ends. Or you can carry it privately, examine it honestly, extract from it what it was trying to teach you, and emerge from it without having handed anyone the map of your most vulnerable geography. The second lesson is this: your healing belongs to you, not to the people who want to watch it, not to the ones who became more interested in you the moment you began to break. Heal in private, heal with intention, heal for the version of yourself that comes after, not for the comfort of an audience that needs you broken to feel whole. Suffering shown to the wrong eyes is not vulnerability, it is sacrifice. And you are not someone else's offering. The third lesson lives in the space between where you are and where you are going, and it I biet dionai. This is the lesson that separates people who consistently achieve from people who consistently almost achieve. You know the feeling. You are in motion. Something is happening, quietly, beneath the surface of your daily life. A direction is forming, a decision is crystallizing, and the temptation arrives, natural and almost irresistible, to tell someone about it. Not to ask for help, not to seek guidance, simply to share the aliveness of being in the middle of something real. So you mention it. And then they ask questions, and the questions seem innocent. But each one requires you to defend something you had not yet finished deciding, to justify a direction you were still feeling your way through, to explain a move that made complete sense inside your own mind, but loses something essential in the translation to words before it is ready. And suddenly, without anyone intending it, you are no longer moving. You are explaining. You are defending. You are standing still in the space between intention and action, spending energy justifying the journey instead of completing it. Nietzsche was precise about this. He believed that speech, in the wrong moment, was a form of premature completion, that by describing what you intend to do, you give your mind the sensations of having partially done it, which quietly reduces the urgency that would have carried you all the way through. The third lesson is this: the announcement is not the action, and the energy you spend explaining your next move is energy borrowed directly from the move itself. Let them be surprised by where you arrive, not warned about the road you took to get there. Move in silence. Let the result introduce itself. And now the fourth lesson, the deepest one. The one that required 3 lessons of preparation before you were ready to receive it. Hailung Thut Ki. This is the one that changes everything at the root level, not just the behavior, but the internal architecture that was producing the behavior. You were controllable not because the wrong people found your pressure points. You were controllable because you had not yet gone into the room where those pressure points live and made peace with what you found there. Every trigger that someone used against you was pointing at something inside you that you had not yet been willing to face. Every lever they pulled was attached to a fear you had been feeding in private while pretending in public that it did not exist. The fear that you are not enough. The fear that the people you love most will eventually leave if they see everything. The fear that the dream is actually too large and the world will confirm it if you stay still long enough to hear the verdict. These fears do not disappear because you hide them better. They grow in the hiding. They become more powerful precisely because they are never examined, never named, never brought out into the honest light of your own clear attention. Nietzsche's entire life, every word he wrote, every idea he carved out of his own extraordinary suffering, was aimed at this single target: the unexamined interior, the self that is running on fear it has never admitted to itself. He called the examined life the only life worth choosing, not because examination is comfortable, but because it is the only thing that produces genuine freedom. Et die, bit Dione. And it is the most important thing in all 4 parts of everything you have heard tonight. The people who could not hurt you are not the people with no access to your vulnerabilities. They are the people who looked at their own vulnerabilities so honestly, so completely, so without flinching, that the vulnerabilities lost half at their power to be used as weapons. You cannot be destabilized by a truth you have already accepted. You cannot be controlled through a wound you have already healed on your own terms. You cannot be moved by someone pressing a lever that you have already disconnected yourself. The fourth lesson is this: self-knowledge is not vanity. It is armor, the most impenetrable kind, not because it makes you hard, because it makes you whole. Know what controls you before someone else does. Then take the lever back. 4 lessons, 4 doors, each one closing from the inside, one by one. As you develop the discipline and the courage to examine what is actually there, rather than what you wished was there. This is the beginning of sovereignty. Condition, Nietzsche believed, was the highest thing a human being could achieve. Not fame, not success, not the admiration of the world, but the quiet, unshakable reality of a person who is no longer available to be owned. And now there is one thing left. One final piece that ties all 4 lessons together into something you can carry out of this conversation and actually use. Something that will tell you not just what to guard, but exactly how to begin building the kind of life where the guarding becomes second nature. Because knowing the 4 doors is not the same as knowing how to live with them closed. That is what comes next, and it is simpler than you think, and harder than anything else you have tried. Simpler than you think. and harder than anything else you have tried. That is where we left off. And before we go forward, we go back, not to the beginning of the story, to the beginning of you, to the version of you that existed before the first time you trusted someone with something real and watched them use it, before the first dream that died in someone else's mouth, before the first wound you displayed and saw reflected back as entertainment, before the first move you announced and watched get blocked before you even began. That version of you was not naive. That version of you was simply unequipped. And everything you have heard tonight, every uncomfortable truth, every moment of recognition that made your chest tighten, has been the slow process of equipping you for what comes next. So before the breakthrough, we stop. We name what was learned, one lesson at a time, one breath between each. You do not owe anyone a preview of what you are building. DUNG. Your healing belongs to you, not to the audience that needs you broken to feel whole. DUNG. Move in silence and let the result introduce itself. DNG. Know what controls you before someone else does. Then take the lever back. DNG. Read those 4 sentences again. Not quickly. The way you read something, when you know, it is going to change the way you move through the world for the rest of your life. Because these are not motivational phrases. These are load-bearing walls. Remove any one of them, and the entire structure of the life you are trying to build becomes vulnerable to the first strong wind that comes through. And winds will come, they always do. Now, the breakthrough. This is the part where most videos give you a list. 10 steps, 7 habits, 5 daily practices. Something organized and manageable and easy to screenshot and save, and never actually do. This is not that. There is only one thing I am asking you to do. One thing. Not tomorrow. Not when the circumstances are better. Not when you feel more ready. Today. Because readiness, it I bit dionai, is not a feeling that arrives before you act. It is a feeling that arrives because you acted. Here is the challenge. Think of one thing you have been about to reveal. One thing you have been on the verge of sharing, announcing, confessing, or explaining to someone who has not yet earned the right to hold it. Maybe it is the plan you have been building in private. Maybe it is the pain you have been performing for someone whose attention you have mistaken for care. Maybe it is the next move you have been describing to people who are not on your side of the board. Maybe it is the fear you keep handing to the person who keeps using it. Identify it. Name it clearly in your own mind. Feel the specific texture of it, the familiar pull toward disclosure, the habit of openness that has been costing you more than you ever fully calculated. And today, do not share it. Not as an act of coldness, not as punishment for anyone, not out of bitterness or suspicion, or the defensive crouch of someone who has been hurt and is simply protecting the wound. Do it as an act of self-respect. Do it as the first deliberate exercise of the sovereignty that Nietzsche spent his entire life describing, but that you get to actually live. Do it because the discipline of one single choice, made consciously, made from wisdom rather than from habit or emotion, begins to change the architecture of how you move through the world. One choice compounds. That is the part no one tells you. You make one conscious decision to guard something that matters, and your nervous system registers it. Something shifts at a level beneath thought. A quiet signal fires that says, this person knows the value of what they carry. And from that signal, slowly, other choices begin to align. The next conversation feels different. The next temptation to overshare meets a resistance that was not there before. The next person who reaches for the lever finds that the lever has been moved. Not because you built a wall, because you built a self. Hei lung ye tut ki. Because this is the part of the journey that the wounded version of you could not have understood. The goal was never silence for its own sake. The goal was never to become unreachable, unknowable, sealed away from the kind of real human connection that gives life its meaning. The goal was selectivity, the discipline of knowing fictionalized between the person who has earned the difference and to person who has earned the weight of your truth and the person who simply arrived at the right moment when the weight became too heavy to carry alone. Because connection built on wisdom is not colder than connection built on desperation. It is warmer, infinitely warmer. Because when you finally share yourself with someone who has proven through time and action that they can be trusted with what you carry, the sharing becomes something entirely different. It becomes not exposure. It becomes intimacy, real intimacy. The kind that does not leave you scanning the room 3 months later, wondering what was used and how and when. That kind of connection is worth protecting the journey toward. And you protect it by refusing to give to everyone what was only ever meant for the rare few. Et I biet Dione. And it may be quietly, the most quietly radical thing in everything you have heard tonight. Boundaries are not walls. They are the shape of your self-respect made visible. And the people who are truly meant to be in your life, the ones who have the patience and the character to earn what you carry, will not be put off by them. They will be drawn closer, because they recognize in your discretion the same thing they practice in their own lives. Like calls to like. Strength recognizes strength, and sovereignty, true sovereignty, creates a gravity that draws toward you exactly the kind of people who deserve to be there. So today, one choice, guard one thing, not forever, not from everyone, just today, just this one thing, from the person who has not yet proven they deserve it. And see how you feel at the end of the day. Not the relief of having shared and been received. The other feeling, the quieter one. The feeling of having kept something sacred that was yours to keep. The feeling of having chosen yourself over the need to be seen. That feeling is the beginning of the person Nietzsche believed you were capable of becoming. Not louder, not harder, not colder. Simply undefeatable. And now there is a question I want to leave with you. Not to answer out loud, not in the comments, not to a friend, not even fully to yourself right now, just to carry. If the version of you that exists 5 years from now, the one who has closed all 4 doors, who has mastered the discipline of silence, who moves through the world with the quiet gravity of someone who knows exactly what they carry and exactly who has earned the right to see it. If that version of you could look back at this moment, at the you who is here right now, listening, recognizing, feeling the particular weight of everything that has been named tonight, what would they say to you? Not about what you should do differently, about what you already know that you have been pretending not to know. Because Nietzsche believed that the hardest truth a person ever faces is never about the world. It is about the distance between who they are and who they are capable of being. And the only thing standing in that distance is the decision to begin. You have already begun by watching this, by staying through the uncomfortable parts, by letting the recognition land instead of deflecting it. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. Power is not loud. Power is not desperate. And power, as you now understand in a way you did not when this began, is never fully revealed. Neither are you, not to the world, not yet. But to yourself, starting today, you can be seen completely, honestly, without armor and without performance. Because the only witness who needs to see all of you in order for you to be free is the one looking back at you every morning. Start there, guard everything else. And if something in these 5 parts landed for you tonight, if one lesson hit somewhere specific, somewhere you recognized without wanting to, leave it in the comments. Tell me which door you have been leaving open. Tell me which lesson you are taking with you. Tell me the name of the city where you are watching this, because this conversation is happening all over the world right now, and that matters. Like this video if you believe that someone in your life needs to hear it, because the people who most need this are rarely the ones who will find it on their own. Share it with them, not as a message, as a gift. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, do it now. Because every week we go deeper into the ideas that the world keeps quiet and the truths that the comfortable life tries to talk you out of hearing. Nietzsche spent his life writing for a reader who did not yet exist. A reader strong enough to receive the truth without flinching. A reader who wanted to be free more than they wanted to be comfortable. He was writing for you, and you just proved him right.